Hey guys, Pete here. Going to talk about some Game of Thrones history today, from what I think is one of the most interesting events that comes up several times in the Song and Ice and Fire books, the Tourney at Harrenhal. If you're a show-only fan, you might wonder, why is this important? There are a few reasons. One, at the end of Season 6, we just had confirmation that Jon Snow's parents are Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. His father crowned his mother the Queen of Love and Beauty at the tourney instead of his own wife, and that basically led to Robert's Rebellion. 2. Dany's father traveled to the Tourney of Harrenhal because he feared that her brother Rhaegar was plotting against him. And 3. A confirmed filming location for an action scene in Season 7 is the ruins of a Roman city in Spain. And when I first saw the pictures, the first thing that came to mind was that we were going to get a Harrenhal flashback. I know Spain isn't really Riverlandish per se, but the structure seemed like a good place for some jousting, and they can do quite a bit with CGI effects as far as the background goes, so we'll just have to see what happens. I'm probably wrong about this, but my fingers are crossed either way. And hey, the TV show should really cover this because it's essential in relation to Jon's parentage and basically all the events that we know of from the show. If that doesn't hook you in, just think about the fact that if there was no tourney at Harrenhal, none of what happens in the TV show Game of Thrones would have ever happened. The Targaryens might still be on the throne, which means no King Robert, who would have never married Cersei, and so on. So it's important. There's a lot to talk about, so I will be breaking this video up into parts. In the first video, I'm going to talk about what we know history-wise from the book series and from the world of Ice and Fire. And part 2 will likely be about the tourney itself, and Meera Reed's account of the tourney that she heard from her father will likely be a video of its own. Before we get into any of that, we need context, so let's jump right into it. So in A Song of Ice and Fire, we first hear about the tourney at Harrenhal in the very first book, A Game of Thrones, while Ned is locked up in the black cells beneath the Red Keep. Ned was 18 when he attended the tourney with his brothers and sister, and still has vivid memories of it. In A Storm of Swords, Jaime remembers the tournament when he passes through Harrenhal as a captive of the brave companions. In the show, think of when he rescued Brienne from the bear pit after getting his sword hand cut off. And later in that same book, Meera Reed tells Bran a story about the tourney as they are traveling north. Before he reveals his identity to her, Sir Barristan Selmy tells Dany about how her brother Rhaegar had won the tournament. Later in A Dance of Dragons, Sir Barristan has another memory of the tourney and how he was unseated by Rhaegar in the final joust. In A World of Ice and Fire, we get a lot more details about the tourney and the politics surrounding it in King Aerys II chapter and the section on the year of the Fall Spring. What we know from all of this is that the tourney was held in 281 AC at Harrenhal, which is in the Riverlands. It is also known as Lord Whent's Great Tournament, since Lord Walter Whent put the tournament on to celebrate his maiden daughter's name day. 281 AC is also known as the year of the Fall Spring, and that's because spring seemed like it was coming and then winter ended up just coming back. The tournament lasted for 10 days and is remembered as the greatest of its time. The main reason being that the prizes Lord Whent put up were so large. For comparison, Tywin Lannister held a big tourney to celebrate King Aerys's rule in its 10th year, and Whent's prizes were worth 3 times what Tywin offered at a time when he was actually hand of the king. With such large prizes, which were announced the year before the actual tournament, pretty much everyone who was able to make it came to Harrenhal. Some people saw this as Lord Whent showing off his wealth while trying to outdo the king's hand, but at the same time, a lot of people didn't believe he could afford it. For them, this must have meant there was a secret backer working behind the scenes. In this scenario, the most likely candidate would be Rhaegar Targaryen, who had no shortage of gold and who may have been looking to bring all the lords of the major houses of Westeros together to discuss what could be done about his father, the Mad King, who at this point was definitely spiraling into madness. Why would Rhaegar want to do this? Well, 4 years before the tourney, King Aerys had traveled to Duskendale over a dispute with the lord there over taxes. It's a long story, but in the end it turned out to be a trap and Aerys was taken hostage. It was up to the king's hand, Tywin Lannister, to bring troops and free the king. When he arrived and surrounded the castle, he got word from the people inside that if there was any sign that they were going to try to breach the walls, the king would be murdered on the spot. So in the end, Sir Barristan came up with this crazy plan and he was able to slip into the castle and free Aerys, but the king never recovered from the ordeal. It created a rift between Aerys and Tywin, who had been friends since childhood, and, it basically split them up, and they would never, Aerys especially would never trust Tywin again. After Duskendale, the king refused to leave the Red Keep, and he like stopped cutting his hair and his fingernails and became completely paranoid that everyone was out to get him. So there were real questions about whether the king was still capable of ruling the realm, and his his relationship with Rhaegar was strained. When Rhaegar married Elia Martell of Dorne, there were no other sisters for him to marry, like as his father and other Targaryens had in the past. They ended up deciding to live at Dragonstone instead of King's Landing. So when they had their first child, Rhaenys, they came back to the Red Keep to present the child to the king and the queen, and the king actually refused to hold her, and what he said was that, the baby smelled Dornish. That was his excuse for not wanting to hold Rhaegar's baby. After that incident, the relationship became more distant, and this was pretty much at or around the same time the tourney was planned in 280 AC. If Rhaegar was behind planning the tournament, he would have guessed that he could be able to bring all these lords together without his father actually being there. After all, Aerys hadn't left the Red Keep for the better part of 4 years at this point. This probably would have worked, but Aerys' new master of whisperers, Varys the Spider, convinced the king that Rhaegar was behind the tourney and was planning to have him removed as king by calling a great council in Harrenhal. Since we are pretty familiar with Varys and his ability to know what's going on, I think this is a clue that it's likely that Aerys was right to listen to him and attend the tourney after all. So the politics basically boiled down to this. Everyone knew that Aerys was crazy. He was known for burning people that pissed him off with wildfire. But even so, not everyone wanted him removed from the throne. As cruel as he was also known to be generous to those who pleased him. And some people, especially the lords that were on his small council, were gaining wealth and lands while he ruled. On the other hand, there were plenty of people who just wanted him gone, and so there were basically two groups vying for power. The group that was behind the Mad King, and the group that was behind his son Rhaegar. To put into perspective the potential hype going on in Westeros around this tourney, check out this excerpt from The World of Ice and Fire. Many tales have grown up around Lord Whent's tournament. Tales of plots and conspiracies, betrayals and rebellions, infidelities and assignations, secrets and mysteries, almost all of it conjecture. The truth is known only to a few, some of whom have long passed beyond this mortal veil and must forever hold their tongue. In writing of this fateful gathering, therefore, the conscientious scholar must take care to separate fact from fancy, to draw a sharp line between what is known and what is simply suspected, believed, or rumored. So let's look at what is known. As mentioned, the tourney was held in 281 AC and offered massive prizes. It was spread out over a 10-day period with 5 days of jousting, a 7-sided melee, various other contests for archery, axe throwing, a horse race, plus a tournament of singers and a mummer's show. There's no hard evidence that Rhaegar was behind the tournament, and its purpose was to gather support from, the other houses to ruin his father, but many, including the members of the King's Small Council, believed this to be the case. They went as far as to urge the king to forbid the tournament, or outlaw all tournaments so that it wouldn't happen. King Aerys knew that the common people of his realm loved tourneys, though, and decided to attend in the end anyways. Grand Maester Pycelle claims that the king was hoping to use the event to help him win back the love of his people. The large prizes drew competitors and lords from throughout the Seven Kingdoms, and even more were inspired to make the journey when they heard the king would be in attendance. However, most people were shocked when they actually saw the king, and how much he had visibly declined in health. Remember, he hadn't had his hair or nails cut for like 4 years. We don't know that Rhaegar was behind it, but we do know that he had the opportunity to be the one behind it. Lord Whent's brother was Sir Oswell Whent, who was a member of the Kingsguard. It wouldn't have been that difficult for the prince to use Sir Oswell as his liaison with Lord Walter Whent. Pretty much everyone was there, so I'll just emphasize some of the characters that non-book readers will know from the show. So in attendance, we had King Aerys II, the Mad King. We saw him in Bran's vision during season 6. Robert Baratheon, eventually, he became King Robert after his rebellion that basically started at this tourney. Mace Tyrell, he was Marjorie and Loras's father. He ended up dying when Cersei destroyed the Great Sept in the TV show. Jon Arryn, who served as King Robert's hand, and he was close friends with Ned from their childhood. His death and the information he found out about the illegitimacy of Cersei's children with Robert set in motion the Game of Thrones as we know it. The Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and his wife Elia Martell. We've talked about Rhaegar and what his motivations might have been, and we'll talk a lot more about what happens in the next video. Prince Oberyn Martell, he came to King's Landing for Joffrey's wedding in the show and ended up being Tyrion's champion in the trial by combat against the Mountain. He did that because he wanted to avenge the death of his sister, Elia, who was married to Rhaegar, but in the end, he ends up being killed. Arthur Dayne. In the show, we see him defending the Tower of Joy, and he's beating Ned. Howland Reed kills him from behind. He's also known as the Sword of the Morning and is considered one of the greatest knights in the Seven Kingdoms, in his lifetime. Ashara Dayne, she was Arthur Dayne's sister. Show watchers might not know who she is, but she is an important character, so we'll probably talk about her some more. Barristan Selmy, a member of the Kingsguard who is well respected by all. King Joffrey ends up removing him as one of the White Cloaks because he's old, and Joffrey wanted the Hound on the Kingsguard. After that, Barristan travels to Essos, finds Daenerys, and serves her until he's killed by the Sons of the Harpy. Jaime Lannister, King Aerys actually makes him a member of the Kingsguard during the opening ceremony of the tourney, and he did that to put Lord Tywin in his place, essentially taking his heir from him. We'll talk about that part more later. Brandon Stark, Ned's older brother. Before the tournament, Brandon had been betrothed to Catelyn Tully, who eventually marries Ned and becomes Catelyn Stark. Eddard Stark, or Ned, he was 18 at the time of this tourney. Benjen Stark, Ned's younger brother. We know him from the early seasons of the TV show as a member of the Night's Watch. Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, who we now know as Jon Snow's mother on the TV show. Howland Reed, he's Jojen and Meera's father. He's a really interesting and mysterious character we have only seen on the show in that one Tower of Joy scene. And those are the major players. I mean, there's a million other people there, but you won't know who they are, and these are the ones that are, we'll talk about the most, I guess. So this should set the stage with the story, motivations, and working of the different players before the Tourney of Harrenhal. In part 2, we'll talk about the events of the day and how things would never be the same in the Seven Kingdoms after the tournament's conclusion. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions from this video or anything you want me to clarify in the future videos. In part 3, we'll dig into the Mystery Night, the Night of the Laughing Tree, so if you have any questions about that, go ahead and post them. And please like the video if you found it interesting, and subscribe to my channel for, so you can see all my new videos as soon as they come out. Right now I'm working on finishing up the script for my second part of the Queen Cersei series, and then so I'll put that out, and then I'll put part 2 of this series up right after as soon as I can. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.